So Susie, hi. How are you guys? Dom, how's it going? Um,
Doing well.
so Susie has her Slam Dance screening very soon. Susie, do you want to tell us for all of the wonderful new viewers, would you like to tell us about your film and again how we can see it at Slam Dance?
Yeah, it's a movie about a woman named Darla Peterson. She finds out she owes this huge debt, like tax debt, and teams up with a sentient kombucha SCOBY named Mother, who can grant mind-blowing orgasms. And this is how they scheme to raise this money and get into adventures along the way. And in exchange, all Mother wants is to go to space. So it's totally straightforward.
Sounds awesome. I've seen the movie. It's amazing. My voice suddenly gave out. But how can we watch it, Susie? So it's screening at Slam Dance.
It's at
Um,
SLAMDANCE. We're super excited. There are two screenings, live screenings there, one on the 20th at 10:30 a.m. Um, and the second one on Wednesday, the 24th at 3:45 p.m. If you're in the area or already there because of skiing reasons or other reasons. And there is also a virtual membership. I guess you can either pay for like, there are different subscription models. I don't really know what those are just yet. But yeah, it's going to be online and available for watching that way
oh,
throughout the run of
cool.
the festival.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'll definitely do some research on that, and I'll post the I'll post all of the
Yeah.
links down in the description. That sounds really cool though. That you could watch things online, so
Yeah, I
it'll be
keep forgetting to bring
streaming,
that
and
up.
yeah,
Mhm.
very cool. And you'll be there, and the director Eric LaPlante will be there. Some of the actors will be there,
Yes,
right?
Eric and I will both be there. Alex is going to be there, who stars in the movie. Rashida Crockett's going to be there, who plays Charity Legitimate. And we're all going to be doing the first Q&A together. Yeah.
Sounds awesome. I'm sure you're very excited. I'm so excited for you and for the team.
Yeah, as it's
And
getting closer and closer, it's kind of
yeah,
wrecking a little bit, but super exciting feeling too.
awesome. Congratulations again, Susie. Can't
Yeah.
wait to see how people receive it. I'm sure it'll be awesome.
I know
Cool.
there's always like this anxiety that it's just not going to land, and it's like nobody's going to get it and we're just going to be like in tears at the end. But so
No,
far that hasn't happened. Very
yeah,
really.
awesome. Can't wait. So today we're talking about The Omen, the 1976 film directed by our good friend Richard Donner, a podcast alumni. Yeah. So yeah, let's start with the let's start from the beginning, I guess. The opening shot. This one's kind of interesting because it's kind of like a title card, right? And we see the image of Damien and the upside down cross with the music. And then we kind of get to the actual the opening shot. But any thoughts about the opening, guys? How it was handled? Dom, or you you've watched this film before, right?
Yeah. I probably 20, 25 years ago, probably watched this
Oh,
for the first
really?
time.
Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
have you watched it
Yeah.
since though?
I watched it again uh earlier today, actually.
Oh, wow.
Um,
First time in like
like
20 years
really
then.
early. Well, no, I think I probably had watched it once or twice in between as well. This is one of my, on that scariest films that I've mentioned a couple times, that article I wrote. Um, this is on there as well. So this is like in my top 30 horror films probably of all time.
Hmm.
So um, yeah, this is one of, and it's also like right up my alley, right? So like psychological horror specifically with religious overtones is like my wheelhouse. So I'm like prime audience for this. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the opening, I kind of liked that before the image comes on, all the titles are sort of left of center in order to leave space for that image. So at first
Mm,
you're kind of like, why is that not centered? And that was enough to like throw you off a little bit already. And then you have, the boy silhouetted and his shadow is across. So it's not the proper shadow, which is kind of a cool image. And then once it starts, it pretty much starts with um what is it? The child is dead or something like that. It's some,
yeah.
the first, there's a lot of like provocative set pieces in terms of like scenes that are memorable in this movie, but also a lot of provocative lines. And that's, I think, one of them, right? Like to start a movie with the child is dead is
Mm,
it's a great opening, I think.
mm,
I like anything that just kind of plunges me into the deep end of anything. It just really gets going as soon as it starts. You do see Gregory Peck in that. I guess it's his state vehicle, and he's being, but you don't find that out until kind of later. I had also seen it sort of a long, long time ago in full, and haven't sat down and watched it like this until yesterday, and just really enjoyed it. It was like it's held up very well, and you're just immediately engrossed. Like the child is dead, as Thomas said, and you just want to know like why, what's going on, even as like I kind of knew and remembered basically the story.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I guess I did have a really big question about this opening. Um, was it believable to you that like Gregory Peck's character would do this? That he would like conspire with the priest to like make it seem like this was his kid and then present it to the wife, like his wife. Like, did you believe this? Did you buy this that he would do something like this?
I mean, I believed it only because it's the very beginning. So it's almost like I don't know enough about the character yet to think he wouldn't do this because like someone on Earth would do this, and the movie's telling us that he's one of those people. Um, I mean, they motivate it by saying something about adoption, and then he specifically does say like, no, my wife wanted one of our own, and then um, he's also like on the fence, and the I think the way they show it, it's almost like they allow the priest to convince him by saying that God gave you a son today. Because I mean, the priest says like, well, this other mother had a baby at exactly the same time, and the mother died. Right? Is the setup, and at the same time that your child died. So it's almost like the priest is telling him like God wanted this to happen. So I think he is in an emotional state, and that's enough for him to buy into that. Like I didn't question it at least.
Mm. Yeah, it just made me wonder, like, because he's it just it's such an interesting lie and it's such a big lie, to tell your wife. And
Well,
that's
what's
obvious
it?
that's obvious his downfall, right? Like is this like what he did here.
If anything, I think it is a little bit of a plot contrivance that it happens because they want that decision to be on on Thorne. Because when you really think it back, the only sort of quote unquote plot hole that I have with this movie is why do this at all, right? So they take
Mm,
presumably a baby dies, they take the baby away. He makes this decision, they bring a new baby back and substitute the baby. But really, there's no reason in the plot for them to may even tell him, right? They're not telling the wife. Why tell him? Why not just bring this other baby and swap it out? Um, so to me, it's more like they want this father to be implicit in this decision. So like there's not really that I could see in the film. There's not any reason why he has to make this decision or even know that this is happening. If they're going to, especially, I mean, we should say spoilers, obviously, but later they find that the other baby didn't actually die naturally, that they killed his actual baby. So it's like if they're going to go to that length, why not like why bring him into the decision making at all? Why not just swap the baby when they take the baby away, put the new baby in, and never tell
Mm,
anyone?
right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, exactly. Um, yeah, maybe it was all meant to be. I don't know. Susie, any thoughts about the opening and
Um, I just have to echo what both of you said already about like the surprisingness of this.
mm,
I'm also very much in the camp of whatever you throw at people like 5 to 10 minutes in a movie is just accepted. It's sort of like, yeah, I know it's Gregory Peck and everything, and golly, I don't really see him doing that, but his brow is so furrowed. So he must be like very distressed about this. But you're just happy to go along with it. I think audiences will just give you a good old chunk of time to like, okay, I'm here. What are we about to watch? Great point about like why did they even bother telling him though? I'm like
yeah,
just sitting here going, um, yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
Honestly, I had a harder time believing that he would be having a baby at that age. Because like I just looked it up and he was born in 1916, which means he was 60. And
Oh,
like he doesn't look young. I don't think he looks 60
he doesn't look
necessarily, but
60.
like he doesn't look like a new like a person who's gonna have a kid for the first time, like his first kid. So I was more like, oh, this is a little bit of a casting stretch. I get it. It's Gregory Peck. You're going to take him. But like, I was just like, it's not the visual image that I expect of like these newborn parent, like these young parents. But maybe that makes sense, right? Like it adds to it. Like they've been trying so long potentially to have a baby
Mm,
that adds even more weight to this. But like he didn't seem to me like a new father in terms of like anything else about him. But yeah, like Susie said, I totally get like, you know, when an audience sits down and starts experiencing a movie, it's like I'm gonna take whatever they give me at the beginning, and it's gonna teach me like what is the world of the story, and I'm gonna be okay with it, and I'm not gonna start like poking holes in it definitely at the beginning. I don't think that's the right way to even watch a movie, right? You're supposed to suspend your disbelief at the beginning.
Yeah.
yeah, maybe that's an interesting like tool that we can exploit as writers, just to kind of just make something up
Yeah.
in the beginning and then kind of go with it.
Well, isn't that why writing first acts is always so fun too, right? Because like it's for me at least, it's always so easy to write the first act, and obviously the first act gets rewritten more than anything else, especially once you finish a full draft, because you realize like, oh wait, for act three to work, I need to put this and this into act one, and for me, writing a premise, writing the first act of something, and then this is also why people don't finish screenplays a lot, I think, because it's so
mm,
exciting and fun to write that first draft, and then it's like all the drudgery of the second act, and
I always
um,
equate it with like relationships. You start off with like being heavily infatuated, and then it's sort of like the drudgery later.
mhm.
But you got to commit sometimes.
Yeah,
mm,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, how'd you feel about their relationship? Um, Catherine and Robert. I really liked it. I thought there was a lot of like love there. Did you guys happen to catch the remake? Dom, did you did you watch the remake ever? The 2008 version? Do you remember
I
it?
think I did see the remake when it came out, but only once, and I don't.
Yeah.
My experience with the remake is more like re-seeing the big scenes, right? Like with the nanny in the beginning, like it's more like experiencing, okay, they did that again, and this, but it was more like I don't really remember it as a distinct film or anything special like relative to this.
Hmm.
I mean, you asked about like Kathy and Robert, like the Thorns relationship. I kind of felt two ways about it. I kind of thought on the one hand, it was interesting that they went out of their way to show them having a good relationship, right? Like it's like this idyllic thing in the beginning, which is
Hmm.
very different than The Shining, right? We talked about with The Shining, they kind of never have a good relationship. And the second thing was though that it felt a little bit to me like there was a note that like let's make sure we know that these two people care about each other, and instead of getting like these really interesting cute character moments, we just get them kissing. Like it's kind of repetitive, like there's like two or three different times where they just kiss, and it's like, oh well, I get it, they're going out of their way to like sneak a kiss, but it's nothing more than that. Like it's just the same exact, like, okay, we're gonna have a moment where they kiss. So to me it felt like yes, they're doing a good job of establishing that they actually love each other, but it didn't give me any like warm, fuzzy feelings about how great
Mm,
their relationship is necessarily. It was just like, okay, I get it. We're establishing that they love each other. And then there's like an interesting, almost like slideshow with still photos to like
yeah.
fast forward through time while Damien grows up, which I was kind of like, um, nowadays we have such different relationships with digital photos and slideshows that felt so different to me,
Mm,
um, than I'm sure it did in the 70s. Um, but yeah, I mean, I thought their relationship was fine. I thought they did a good job of establishing that they love each other. And I did note, especially given our whole conversation about The Shining, that I was like, I liked that. I liked that there was somewhere to go. There was a de-evolution possible, because it's like, okay, there's these people who are happy and they're potentially a happy family.
Mhm. Like how Reagan and her mom are they have a great relationship, which is
mm,
I always look with envy at any teenage girl or like not teenage even, but like a young girl that has a great relationship with her mom, with like no real problems. I mean, I kind of had like a similar feeling. It just seemed like we really need to hammer home that they have a great relationship and they're super in love. And they accomplished that, I guess. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I would
agree with
agree.
yeah. I remember Soul saying that he didn't get that feeling in The Exorcist, and I was like, oh man, there's no. But I agree with you completely. Like they both films do that really well. Is like establish the normalcy of a sort of happy familial relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I say that because I did watch the remake and there's no chemistry between. Do you remember that, Dom? There's no chemistry between Julia Stiles and I forget the gentleman's name, the actor. Have you watched the remake, Susie?
A
You
long
may
time
have.
ago in parts, yeah.
In
I
parts,
feel the
yeah.
exact same. I'm just like no chemistry,
Yeah.
and because of that, like no fear for her. But I guess I also knew the Omen, and I anticipated certain these like set pieces kind of repeating themselves. So
Mm,
I was anticipating, and it was like, again, like meh.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, I should say, going into this, like I watched the remake probably the year it came out, but like was going into it with an uphill battle, right? Because like this is such a classic that it's almost like it's one of those films for me that I was almost like offended that they would even make a remake. And so I probably wasn't the best audience member. But also like a lot of these things that are steeped heavily in religion, anything more like the less modern it is to me, the more weight it actually seems to have.
Mm,
Like somebody would actually have reverence for a priest, or that these things could happen. Like all of that, the older something is seems more real. Whereas like 2008 is modern enough for me to be like, I don't know. Like I'm sure it just feels there's something about religion and sort of older decades that feels more believable to me.
mm. So, Dom, are you saying that it's hard, it's difficult to make like it would be difficult to make a modern horror film that has like a religious,
I
sort
don't
of.
think it's more difficult because a lot of the stuff that I write is exactly in this genre. But I think as a writer, director, you can't ignore it. You have to
Hmm.
either show that like these people are so religious that they are maybe more religious than a lot of the people, especially on the coast, kind of hang out with, or you have to acknowledge it within the film. And really, these characters, even in the 70s, are portrayed as pretty agnostic. Like they don't go to church. Like they go out of their way to show that the only reason Damien is even potentially in danger of going into a church is because of a wedding, which I think a lot of people have that experience, right? It's either holidays or weddings or funerals is the only reason they go to church. um he obviously hasn't been baptized. Um so already in the 70s, these are people who are not really on this, not very religious.
Hmm.
um and it's the same thing in The Exorcist, right? Which, it's just a different thing, right? And that back then it was more like these people are maybe a little bit weird, you get the feeling, because they didn't they have no religious, whereas now I feel like the given would be that people aren't religious and you would have to show if they were in some way.
Hmm.
Like it wouldn't stand out as weird. And I think probably in the 70s it was more a little bit weird.
Yeah. Here's a slideshow that you were mentioning. How did you guys feel about the boy, the young actor? Um, it's interesting though, right? Kids, like kid actors, and Susie, I'm sure you obviously have experience working with kids, and Dom, you do too, right? There are kids in your, yeah. I remember seeing kids in many of your films. Um, it's like they kind of have it or they don't. Of course, they can be trained, and
They don't have like a really fully developed sense of awareness of how they are and how they appear necessarily in different contexts, especially like in maybe a set context. And so because of that, um, if you get a child that kind of understands how to take direction almost. I
mm,
mean, that seems such a vague thing, but it's like some kids seem to just know like what to do a little bit. And all you have to do is like nudge the performance into like what you want. But I can't imagine like finding a child that except for the one that portrays Damien as the 5-year-old as the one we know for most of the movie. You have to get a child that just behaves like that and just kind of knows and speaks and at some deeper level, because like there's no way to direct it. I don't think. I don't
mm,
really know any of like the Donner stuff like with the child actor, but I'd be surprised if it was like he picked somebody that was like way different kind of in their natural appearance and demeanor from Damien.
mm,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think especially when they're this young, you have the sort of advantage of a non-reaction being a reaction. So
Yeah.
like, a lot of this stuff is like something occurring and the fact that the child does not react is so chilling. And I feel like I know I've done in some of my shorts where I had kids in it, and I sort of would say this to anybody who has kids, is just like, you know, start the camera rolling like a full 20 seconds before you even call action, because half the time what you're editing is just like the blank face of that kid, not even doing anything yet. Um, and that can be like so useful, right? Because we'll just put based on the context any emotions onto what, or in this case, like a lack of emotion. But I mean, a lot of these, I wouldn't be surprised, at least I haven't seen this, but if you interviewed people about this, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this stuff was just the kid doing absolutely nothing and just rolling on his face and being
Mm,
like, all right, that's what we're using. Like a good editor is going to see that. And it's the same thing as if it's him acting or not. Not to take anything away from the actor, obviously, but at the very end when he actually says like, no daddy, like that's like so chilling because we do get to hear him talk so little. um so I think the kid is a great kid actor too. I'm not saying he's not, but I mean sometimes you just have to capture what you can and use it.
mm, yeah. Good points. Um, yeah, the birthday party scene, um, with the nanny with the New York accent. Um, yeah, pretty chilling scene, right? I kind of like forgot about this scene.
I
What?
never
Yeah,
have, even
How
since
could
like
you?
the first
This
time I
is
watched it. It's all for you, Damien. I
it's all
just
for
was like,
you. It's
yeah,
a
this is
no,
really
like
I
the
was
reason.
anticipating it and it was still chilling.
yeah, it's a pretty interesting like sequence of events that happens, right? Like the mother, Catherine, she takes Damien away from the babysitter because she senses something is maybe not quite right. Um, and then the thing happens with the nanny, and then Damien has this like connection with the Rottweiler that he sees. Like there is a very like pretty spooky. Again, even watching it now. Any thoughts about this sequence?
I mean, I thought it was excellent. Like I think the first, especially the first half of this film, like in terms of like plot, very little happens. Like you have these standout moments where it's just like the nanny. You have, I think in general, you remember the nanny, you remember the spear with the priest, like you remember again like the sort of set pieces. I will never forget those things. Um, with the dogs are kind of creepy, and then they have a different part where they're like going through like a drive-through safari zoo type thing. So there's a like a recurring thing about animals knowing something about Damien as well. So those are all things that are like stand out, but all go towards like this like it's interesting to me that it just it gives you evidence that something is wrong with this kid starting like after that slideshow, like, and just keeps going. It doesn't have to and doesn't bother taking time to sort of give you the opposite perspective, like, oh, actually nothing is wrong with this kid and it's all just coincidence. It doesn't really bother with that. It just sort of has these moments. It's interesting, like this it's almost 2 hours long. And if you were to give the sort of plot points of it, like the beats of it, there wouldn't be that many in 2 hours. Um So there's a lot of like it's just kind of building its atmosphere and it's building and it just kind of is telling you the same thing but in more and more ways. So there's more and
Mm,
more evidence, all leading up to I think this great moment at the end, right? Where you're would you the question is like would you be able to murder this child who you brought up as your own if
mm,
you know if this entire all of the evidence that you continuously got pointed towards he's not actually your son, he's the antichrist, he's going to bring about the end of the world. And there's no, the guy who he finally goes to see says like he's like, is there any evidence, like what if there's proof, which obviously would be the question everybody has. He doesn't like equivocate or give you something like obtuse. He's like, yeah, there's evidence, he has this mark on his body. And then he's like, "No, I bathed him. I know he doesn't have the mark." So, well, then it's under his hair. It's like very straightforward. It's like less mysterious than it could be. And then he goes and cuts his hair and he finds it. There's not. There are moments like again, I keep going compared to The Exorcist. There's moments in The Exorcist where, oh, Reagan got regular tap water thrown on her and she says it burns. So there's these moments where you would say like, oh wait, is it not the devil, right? Or these other things that happen that it goes back and forth. And I think I mentioned like the book does that even more so, right? Where there's like, oh, it's rats in the attic, or oh, maybe the servants are sort of doing something to this little girl. Like the Omen has none of that. It's called the Omen. It's a like it is a relatively straightforward thing. It's like you have the son of the devil. What the hell are you gonna do? Um, And so I think it's a much more straightforward plot for that, in that, but still really, really satisfying, I think.
mm.
I mean, I guess we should start there. Do you both like this movie? Do you like what are your general thoughts about it?
Who suggested this one? Was it you, Saul?
Yeah, yeah. Because I had watched it a few times in my early college years.
I yeah, really like it. Think it um I mean, I have questions, but they're kind of not super important, like as Dom was talking, I was thinking like what if Gregory Peck in fact did not find the mark of the beast like under the hair, you know what I mean? And chose to kill this child anyway. Um that would be wild. I mean, because like it would be a different movie, obviously, because that movie is the one about like this monster killed my wife, um, and it's not even our child, so I'm just gonna murder it out of my own anger.
Mm,
And that was something, but a totally different movie.
yeah.
Um, and then I got to thinking too about um like the fact that not kind of like not a whole lot happens. Like the big takeaway from act one is they have adopted the Antichrist. And then it's kind of like demonstrating all the ways in which as he's growing up, he's got like weird events happening that kind of cement for you he is the Antichrist, or at least suggest it. I mean, I know it's sort of, do you start the movie assuming he's the Antichrist? I mean, I guess I did, but I also knew he was the second go around. It's not trying to fool you. It's like, no, this child is the devil's spawn. which I always appreciate. But there's something about the pacing and how we get all of the story and character elements. It felt like um, there's this like program called Midsummer Murders, and like they have this like a formula where basically act one is, and these are all about 2 hours. They're like an hour and 40 minutes or so. And the first act is, well, the usually a murder happens, and then you get like kind of associated information about like the people surrounding the death, maybe like the relationships, the town they live in, and things like that. All the quibbles they have. And then the second act becomes more of like a development of all of the relationships. And then later second act into third, it becomes solving the mystery. And it had a bit of that, and because I've been watching so much Midsummer Murders, the fact that we don't get a lot of um, development in the husband and wife, like the Robert and Kathy relationship, I was okay with. It just felt like, oh, you're establishing for us this is their relationship. They're not hiding any deep problems or anything. This is just who they are. So these are the pieces you have to work with as you move into act 2 and 3.
That
Overall, like, yeah, I liked it.
that does
So,
remind me though, like a couple of things I had watching the most recent thing, watching the most recent time felt a little bit like procedural TV in the pacing
Mm,
because there were two things. One was things happening that in most movies, if we were writing it, we would have it all happen in one scene. But there's a couple times where people like meet up with someone and they're like, "Oh, meet me at this time and I'll explain to you."
yeah.
And it's kind of like becomes the next scene. And it's kind of like that's like I've done stuff like that in drafts and then realize like, oh, actually, I just need to have all this happen now because it's like, why do you just tell me right now? Like there's these frustrating moments where it's just like, meet me in the park at the bench. And it's like, okay, I just need 5 minutes. I'm like, if you really just need 5 minutes, like it's going to take, at one point, it's like a rugby field, right? And it's just like, it's going to take you more than 5 minutes to walk to the road. Like, just tell me right now. Like, and then similarly with the relationship with the wife, like when he calls her and she's in the hospital and he's just like, just come to Rome. Like someone's going to come collect you. Like, just tell her. Like that was a little bit frustrating and a little old school to me. Like one of those moments where you just want to scream at the screen and like, hey, like explain to her that I'm worried that someone is going to like kill you. I want like it. There was a couple times where there's like partial information given, and it's just like I'll explain to you later. I mean, the only time I would say it was worthwhile was like when the photographer calls and says like you got to meet with me because he's like he has actual pictures he has to show him, and so that's a little bit more. And then he wants to take him to the priest where he lived, but other than that, like, there's a lot of times when it felt like it could just be like, "Just tell me right now. We don't need another scene for this later." And it like, but yeah, especially the call with the wife. There's a couple of points where it's just like, first of all, he never tells her that Damien's not really her son, even after all this has happened, and the psychiatrist tells, like, oh, she thinks it's not her kid. Like, there's a lot of sort of holding back of information that felt like a little patriarchal, a little bit sort of like in that territory of almost like Gregory Peck has to take care of his wife in a sort of condescending way. Like she's
mm,
not really able, but like that's especially when she thinks she's told you she thinks she's going insane. Like throw her a
mm,
bone, like tell her she's right. Don't act like you have to protect her. Like actually take care of her by sharing the information that you have. So that was a little bit frustrating and a little bit like
mm,
I think I wouldn't, I don't think I think it would be done differently now. But again, like it's however many years later, um, people interact differently. But we're almost what, almost 50 years ago. Um, but so that did feel a little bit like a procedural, like a Midsummer Murder, like or any procedural you see, right, where they're like, so and so go. You'll meet them at this place and they'll give you the information. Then they like go or like a Law and Order thing, and it's like dung dung. And it's like a new location, and now they're interviewing this other person, and it's kind of like, especially because everything is so dire. Like, okay, just tell me right now. Um, I don't think they pushed it to a point where it was just like it was like frustrating, but it was a little bit something that you would question, I think, if you were doing today.
Yeah.
Yeah, some really, really great points. He doesn't tell his wife
Another way on
anything.
that
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go
could
ahead, Susie.
be that he feels like fear and guilt too, tinged in with like the other stuff. Because he doesn't seem like that typical maybe 70s alpha male type of I'm the head of this household and everything. I mean, he doesn't take it too far for sure anyway. But I got a lot of like fear and guilt from like his initial in the hospital waiting room or
Mm,
the where they were in his face. And so I think that assumption carried me through. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't dislike him. I just felt like in this, a lot of the easy thing to do is not tell her in a lot of ways. And so he kind of chooses the quote unquote easier way out for
yeah.
the entire movie because the hard thing to do would be for him to own up to what he chose. And I also get that like the plot would move forward in a different way, so you kind of have to have the character not able to do that in order to keep things the way they are. So I don't really fault. I don't think it's a something that was done incorrectly. It's like a potential frustration, but maybe a necessary frustration. Um, it's just one of those like pet peeves that I think more and more I have, where if somebody gets a phone call and you don't give someone the full information, there better be a really good reason for that. Otherwise, it's kind of just like a filler scene or like something to I don't know. I've made that change in my own scripts and also gotten notes like that for other things that I've done where someone's like, well, so and so does this, but then this is completed 20 pages later. Why couldn't it be completed? And it's like sometimes it's just because you want it that way, and sometimes it's just like, oh, you're right. Like that's just kind of stringing something along in a way that didn't need to be.
Mm, yeah. Um, the poor wife, Catherine. So she, Damien drops her off the balcony, and spoilers, by the way. And then she dies falling out a hospital window. Like did she ever do? You know what I mean? Like she was kind of she's I feel like she's kind of the most innocent person, right? Like she didn't know anything. She suffered all of these terrible things that happened to her. Um
But she
yeah.
did know, right? Like she knew instinctively that this was not
Yeah.
her child, that something was wrong with him. Like she just knew that as a mother.
Mm,
Um, she knows that before her husband knows that, even though her husband has reason to believe that something like that could be, she just feels it. Um, and so like, the other priest says like he won't allow another child to be born, but he's going to kill both of them. And I think that is pretty consistent, right? The logic is like the people who die are the people who threaten in some way the ability for Damien to like grow in power.
mm,
Nobody dies randomly in this. Every single person is somebody who's trying to stop him, and they get immediately taken out.
mm. I mean, so yeah, some other questions that I had was just again about the believability of even the maid, right? How, during that church scene, how she kind of rejects Catherine's request for Damien to, like, oh, what interest would a boy have in going to this wedding? Uh, wouldn't she have been fired? You know what I mean? Like I just I didn't really I didn't really buy it. And then the maid getting the the dog and bringing it into the home, right? These are all, I think, things that not huge things, but maybe things that can be fixed on the page. But what did you guys feel? How did you guys feel about that?
I mean, I bought it because she never wins, right? Like she says, like, oh, maybe you should go in the, but she gets him dressed and they go to the church, and same thing, like she gets rid of the dog, and you could presumably say, like, okay, it took 2 days for the company to come to take the dog away, which is kind of believable. I think if she
Okay.
ever like put her foot down and didn't do something they told her to, yeah, she'd be fired. Um, but then like, especially later in the movie, like when the mother is in the hospital and he's necessarily gallivanting all over Italy to try to trace down this. So it's like, what are you gonna do? Like, get a totally new stranger to take care of your kid?
Right.
Like, that's how I felt, at least. Like, I thought it was all believable. Again, I thought they did a good job of pointing out, like, even when she gets sent there and they both have that moment where they're like, I didn't send for her, you didn't send for her, and I was like, oh no, that's such a like weak thing. But they immediately cut to like both of them running upstairs and being like, hey, how are you here? And they ask her, and she says like, what I thought is a pretty believable answer, right? Like, well, you had hired this other woman who, hanged herself. So obviously we're aware of that. So we sent somebody else to help you out. Like,
Mm,
that seemed believable to me. We have to believe they actually did check her references and they all came out good, right? Like, I think if she has the ability to insert herself in this way and do all that, like the reference is pretty easy to fake those too. So
mm.
um
Wasn't there a TV show as well? Um, like Omen TV show? I think there
I
was, right?
believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
didn't
think
see
I
it
think I
though.
might have watched like a little bit of it, but it just yeah,
Just
just
like the
didn't.
Antichrist's further adventures.
Yes, yeah, something like that. Yeah. It was with like Damien was the protagonist, I think. Yeah, Damien was
Okay.
the protagonist. And then yeah, all of this stuff starts happening to like this weird stuff starts happening and yeah, too contrived. It was yeah, it just didn't well, I don't think it was well received either.
You could imagine somebody pitching that though, right? Because like everything that happens in this film could very much be the beginning of a story, right? Like
Mm,
an antichrist is born who then becomes the adopted child of the president of the United States, and like I don't know if that was the case in the show because I didn't see it, but it's just like it is kind of the beginning of a story because if the story is about the bringing about of the end of the world, like how does that end of the world happen? In the Book of
mm,
Revelations, etc. Like there's there's a whole bunch of stuff written about what would happen if we're the end of the world. So you could see that as a pretty easy pitch. Like, well, okay, so how does it happen now?
mm, yeah.
I appreciate that it was use of a child, like a 5-year-old to be the Antichrist, because there's no asking this kid questions. It's not like he can answer. It's the often like an issue I have with stuff like this is like, why don't you just get it from the you know what I mean? And in this case, you can't. And then aside from that, there's disbelief in Gregory Peck until it's too late. And then, but like leading up to all of that, all of the nannies, everybody kind of seem to have their own agenda. We don't exactly know like their part or what they want, that they are out to protect Damien. And so we're very much following this and tracking it through Gregory Peck's eyes. And he doesn't know what to do. And he, like, by the time he realizes, like, this could actually be something, we're already in Italy and it's too late. So yeah, I appreciated that.
Yeah, I think it's like it is very classical Hollywood screenwriting, right? Like this like stuff we learned at school, Susie, with and Dom too, right? With we have this kind of like this question, this kind of path that we're headed in, and then it's kind of moving around maybe some of those pieces to kind of fit, and kind of finish out the story. Yeah, because if Damien was older, like that wouldn't have it would have been different. It would have been a different story.
Yeah.
And also Susie brought up an interesting point about what if it wasn't very clear, right? What if it was muddier? It would be a completely different kind of story, different kind of adventure for Thorn. Maybe a more interesting one. I don't know. I don't.
I this is the first time I've watched this film while having children, and I could tell you that even with every single thing that has happened here, I would still be unable to do what he decides to do at the end. So
Mm.
for me, that's why it's like it doesn't need any doubt, because if you give him even a trace of doubt, then it's like impossible for a father to do it.
Mm,
And
got
for
it.
me, it was like that was like a courageous move for him to even get to that point where he's willing to murder this child and he's unsuccessful, but like I would be on, you could tell me like the entire world is going to evaporate
Mm,
tomorrow if you don't do this. I'd still be unable to do it, even though that makes no logical sense because everyone, your child included, are going to be gone tomorrow. I'd still be unable to do it. So like for me, if you throw even a trace of doubt into this, it makes no sense at all.
mm,
Whereas like without a trace of doubt, you could, he's not me. So I'm believing this character, Thorn, has gotten to a point where he believes enough and he's gone through enough where he's able to do it. And it was believable to me. But I mean, I would still be unable to do it. So for me, it's like the film is better for the fact that it doesn't insert that doubt.
I like it as is. I
yeah.
guess like it's just always the unquenchable, well, devil's advocate, I guess, that is in my head where it's like, um, what would happen if, and I'm always playing that game. Because frankly, like it would make life difficult for Robert Thorne if he decides to kind of tell his wife that it's an adopted child and that their own child died. That would be like a surprising admission on that character's part that I was
Mm,
like kind of, and now I'm sort of like in this person that I am now, I'm sort of like wanting that just because of that like part of my brain that's like won't shut up over here.
yeah.
And also like I like the little detail when they're in the sort of like ancient burial grounds and he has to see the skeleton of his baby because
Mm,
like before they do it they're like maybe my baby's still alive, like his brain even jumps to like like it's still possible for him to be optimistic where it's like, well, maybe if they swap the babies, maybe my baby's still alive, there's no reason for them to kill it, like that's the reason he gives for like why I have to see it, because it's just like my baby could still be out there.
mhm,
And it's like the fact that I think a father would kind of jump there, even with all the craziness that's going on. Like someone could even be like, "Who cares?" Like, but it's just like a father would want to know if their child was actually still around and they just swapped them. Um, so there were moments like that. Obviously that's the writing, but I think I didn't I believed everything. I think
mm,
there was a lot of things that could have been very unbelievable. I think the only moment that gave me pause in terms of belief, and it was less so now, but I remember first watching it was the moment where the photographer gets beheaded. There's like one extra shot in there where like the head looks pretty like much like a dummy's head. And
yeah.
um, I remember that like taking me out of the film as like again, I think I saw this for the first time when I was like 13 years old. So like for some reason, that's the type of thing you're paying attention to more when you're 13 years old. But
Okay.
like, um, it's in general, considering how outlandish the plot of this movie is, I felt it was like very grounded and very believable, and that the characters were all acting in ways that I could and did believe.
Yeah.
Mm.
I like the fact that the priest that was trying to warn Gregory Peck was himself, I guess, a devil worshiper.
Well, he was, right? Like
And
he's
then
trying
he
to
was trying to, yeah, like kind of reel it back. I don't know why. I found that like very interesting.
another
Well,
good.
because that's how he knows, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom. I cut you off.
No, I just saying I like that too, but I feel like that's how he knows, right? Like the only believable way for him to be able to inform Gregory Peck or Thorne is because he's in on it. He knows, right? Just like the nanny knows
Yeah.
and presumably has the same birthmark, right? Like, because otherwise, if it's just some random priest warning him,
Yeah.
then you have that whole question of like, well, how does this one priest know?
Mm,
And also, you find out that his body was riddled with cancer and he was about to die anyway, right? So it's like that is all like for me, that's a nicely tied up knot. It's like, well, people when they know they're gonna die, start thinking about things they did in their life and what they should do with their life. And it's just like you without having to go with a whole side story here, it's like okay, this guy was going to die anyway, and he decided to try to do something about the fact that he knows that this child is the Antichrist. Um, like I think there is a whole rich storyline there, and they give you just enough to know about it without taking a whole like journey with that character.
Mm. Do you think that he just kind of knew instinctively where to look, Thorne, when he was cutting his child's hair?
I had that moment too, but I was like, we're now bringing it to a close. I mean, I'm, you know, we don't have time to look around in some hair for a birthmark. He's just gonna go right to it.
No, I mean,
Or maybe he
I
knew
think
like there was a little,
they
or
spent,
maybe
come
it
on,
grew
they
into
spent
that.
enough time on that, because look at like if you have white skin under on your scalp, you would just need to see a hint of something at the scalp level that's not white to start cutting. And he does take like 5 seconds to look. So it's like, what did you really want, man? You want like another 30 seconds of him pouring over his scalp? Like
Big
I
old
thought that was
head, you know what I mean? You have to get
Yeah,
all
you
from like
forget.
around the
Yeah,
hairline.
I
at
thought that was
least takes a
fine.
few
And
minutes.
it's I don't know. He got lucky. Come on, like that's I thought it was enough for him to see something to hold the light up to
Yeah.
The
it.
one thing I had a question about was like, by then, why aren't there like police all over his house because his wife had just been murdered, and everybody knows that by then. So
Mm.
why?
Well, they do that, or do they think she jumped?
Oh, oh, okay. I thought it was on.
Because we don't see like the nanny in custody or anything like
No, no,
that.
we don't.
Right. Yeah, we don't.
You're
She
So
right.
just came
You're
home
right.
after that.
yeah, so my assumption is just they think that, I mean, probably, and this is again a reality, if
Mhm.
she had a big fall, they don't really know the circumstances of that. Maybe they after she does this, they think, well, she tried to kill herself, she got herself in the hospital, and she just finished the job.
Oh, hey,
Mm.
good point. Yeah. She had
Yeah.
been going to the psychiatrist. See, this is where like the procedural stuff and like that act 3 X buzz would have like come
Mm.
in. I didn't mind definitely not having that because
Mhm.
I often don't mind like the questions I'm left with sometimes in Act 3.
Mm.
Yeah, and again, for this film, I think there are fewer questions than most. I think like there's enough in the film that if you watch it closely and think about it, like there's some explanation. Whether or not that's the quote unquote intended or right explanation, we don't know. But there's enough there for me as an audience member to be like, okay, they actually thought through all of this. Like even like when the one priest, Father Brennan, shows up at his office and warns him, it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't the original priest have potentially done that? And it's like, well, because first of all, right after all this happened, he was sent to this monastery and he hasn't talked since, but also like he's in on it. So like there's the questions that you initially have, I feel like they actually give you reasons for all of it.
Mm.
Um I think it's classic. I think I enjoyed it this time even more than I have on some of my past
Mm.
viewings. So I think it definitely holds up. Um, it's a quintessential 70s classic psychological horror movie. Um, I think if you like a psychological horror, you like sort of slow burns, I think this is one that you could recommend to someone who fits that audience sort of criteria without worrying about like, oh, they're not gonna like this. It's
Mm.
kind of got everything that you want, right? It's got the creepy kid, it's got the really religious overtones, it's got um believable characters with good acting. I think it's well directed. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend it. I think it's, again, like I said, this is in my like top 30
Mm.
horror movies of all time.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that discussion. If you found it interesting, informative, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It'll really help us out. We have some really cool discussions lined up for you, so I hope you're looking forward to them, and I'll see you next time.